just like aging is a universal unifier, right? We are all getting older. We also all seek those basic necessities, housing being one of them. And so I think every single legislator we talked with this year indicated that there's been at least a handful of constituents in their district that's raised housing as an issue. Not every county is the same in what their challenges are, but every county has a challenge, I think, is what we were hearing from folks. And I think to your point, David, accessory dwelling units, while we certainly come at it from an aging in place perspective, this is also a really unique opportunity for young professionals in towns where maybe I can't afford a full house yet, but I don't really want to be in an apartment. I want it to still feel kind of residential. Accessory dwelling units can offer that solution for folks.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Hey everyone, I'm your host David Fromm, and welcome to another episode of the American Potential Podcast. Let's say you've got an aging parent, and you want to help take care of them and have them live on your property, but you both still want to have your own space. Maybe you come up with the idea of converting the garage into something livable or something else. But here's the catch. In some states, that's actually not allowed. Even though it's your property, there are laws that can stop you from creating a separate space for them to live in. Seeing how this was a problem in Iowa, a diverse coalition worked together to change it. With housing becoming a growing concern, not just for older adults, but for young families too, this coalition came together to push for a smarter, more practical solution. Today's guest was part of that effort. She works for AARP and has been advocating for what's called ADUs, or accessory dwelling units. I want to welcome to the podcast Paige Yontz, who is Advocacy Manager for AARP in Iowa. Paige, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
Good. How are you, David? Great to see you.
Great. Well, very excited for this issue because I remember housing issues have become pretty important across the country. I know our company's been working a lot on it. You're working obviously a lot on it. And I remember when housing first kind of presented itself as an issue, I was completely underwhelmed and not at all interested in it. And then I talked to younger people in particular who can't buy homes, and then older people too, as we're going to talk about here. And I was like, wow, this really is an important issue to so many people. I guess it makes sense. Maybe I'm an idiot because everybody has to live somewhere and we all want, affordable places that we can live. But so I'm excited for this topic. And I kind of wanted to start off by maybe you explaining what qualifies as an accessory dwelling unit.
Great question. I like you, I was not a housing policy wonk prior to getting into this space either. My background's in healthcare policy, and so switching to the housing realm is a little bit different. And accessory dwelling units are the thing that made me most interested. So accessory dwelling units are secondary living quarters on a primary plot of land. That's kind of a generic description of what they are. But essentially, they are wholly independent living structures that are either attached or detached to a primary structure. So in most cases, that's a single family home with a accessory structure. It's hard to define accessory dwelling unit without using the word accessory in it, but it's a secondary structure that somebody can live in. So it has a bedroom, a bathroom, a kitchen, living space, but it is not an extra bedroom, right? So this is somewhere that has all of the amenities you need to live in one place, and it can be attached or detached, but that just depends on what people have room for.
All right. So AARP has been working on this issue at the local level for quite a while. What have you guys been able to do and accomplish?
Yeah, in Iowa in particular, so I joined AARP about 3 years ago. So for about 7 years leading up to that, we had been working with a few cities across the state to modify their local ordinances to allow for these. And we saw some traction, particularly here in Des Moines, where I'm located, which is the capital here in Iowa. And Des Moines had a relatively permissive local ordinance, but there were still some barriers that people were seeing for them really to be a feasible housing option for folks. We worked with other cities like Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, and some counties even took on some ordinance changes. But the the challenging part is that they all had different definitions of what this meant for their city. So just as I defined accessory dwelling unit for you in a really broad sense, that was pretty common across the board. But what you could and could not do was very different here in Des Moines versus what Johnson County, Iowa City, Cedar Rapids area could do. So that was one of the things that we really started to notice as we dove into this at the local level. Yes, it was great that we gained some traction there, but it wasn't going to be a widespread option until we pursued something a little bit bigger.
Yeah, so that took you to pursuing action on the state level, right? And you guys have built a real coalition that was formed to work on this bill. What's the composition of that coalition?
Yeah, the composition of the coalition was interesting. I think the phrase I heard the most was that's some strange bedfellows, and that was a pretty true statement. So the leading kind of top three people within our coalition was AARP, which is myself, you all with AFP, and your state director here in Iowa named Tyler Rager, and then Manufactured Housing Association and their lobbyist named Andy Conlon. We got together after actually ALEC, a conference that we all attended last year, and we realized that we all had a shared interest in accessory dwelling units in the sense that AARP approaches it from an aging in place solution. AFP approaches it more from a property rights, personal rights perspective. And manufactured housing approached it from this is an opportunity for our product to become an accessory dwelling unit. So we got together and we said, you know what, I think we can build a pretty cool group of people who are interested in this. So over the next year and a half, we worked together to build a really strong coalition of folks that included everything from the Realtors Association to Habitat for Humanity, to the credit unions, a lot of disability rights advocates, aging rights advocates, you name it. In total, I think we had just shy of 23 different groups that were working in this coalition. And there's a gal within the lobby who's been there for well over 20 years, and I really respect her. And she came up to me and she said, you know, Paige, I've been doing this for quite a while, and I can confidently say that this is the single best housing coalition that's been built in the state of Iowa in the time that I've been a lobbyist here. And that was just such a huge win for us, right? I mean, it's hard enough to build a coalition of people on a shared topic, let alone something as niche, perhaps, as accessory dwelling units, right? You're either into it or you're not. You're not really agnostic on that. And so it was really cool to see that many different people come together from a lot of different perspectives.
I think that coalition building is such an art, and it's so important to getting important things done. You know, we see it in our state teams that engage in capitals across the country. The ones that are really successful are ones who can look at what the issue is and what we're trying to accomplish, and then build coalitions. Because, you know, so often a go-it-alone strategy isn't going to get you where you want to go. But also, particularly if you have like kind of a varied partisan makeup, you know, you have different groups that have kind of constituencies in the legislature and certainly in the public. And to be able to bring them to bear for a common purpose is so important. So I kind of find your coalition really interesting. It's like everyone is motivated by different things, but you're coming together for this common purpose. And I give you a lot of credit for kind of how you guys constructed that and kept it. Now, the hard thing's keeping it together. Did you guys really have any stories coming from that?
Oh, gosh. You know, well, first, I just want to comment on your comment about coalition building. That was the single most fun thing about this piece of legislation. Yes, getting the legislation done was great. But getting to talk to so many different folks about accessory dwelling units on a topic that a year and a half ago, I probably never would have thought twice about. I think my favorite story on the coalition building part was, you know, to your point, everybody comes at it from a different angle, a different purpose. And I really took it to heart to understand that I think all too often advocates get caught up in the idea that, well, if you're not pushing for my issue for the same reason as me, then it's not a valid effort. And I think that that's entirely wrong. Strong coalitions are built when you can recognize that we can both be advocating for the same thing, but have different reasons and motives for doing it. And that's okay. not everybody has to fall in line with exactly what you think is the right reason for doing something. And that to me was so interesting. And the example I'll give on that is we were getting down to our House vote, and we had a few lingerers who were somewhat influential within the caucus that we weren't sure how they were going to tip the vote. So we really wanted to try and win them over. And so I started doing some digging. And I was like, what else in their district can pull this lever? And in their district is a really large window manufacturer. And I thought to myself, well, I'm curious, do they have any position on accessory dwelling units, right? Windows go into these as a product. So I started doing some searching online. And sure enough, I found an article on one of the manufacturer's blogs about accessory dwelling units. So I said, well, I'm going to dig a little deeper. So I reached out to the author of the blog post, who I did some super sleuthing and stalked her on the internet casually and tried to find who she was. Found her email.
You call that deep research.
Yeah, deep research, right? I found her email on a podcast that she had been a guest on, just like this. And I emailed her out of the blue. I was like, hi, my name's Paige. I'm working on this legislation. I would love to talk to you about it. And shortly thereafter, she set up a call and we chatted. And they themselves, as a manufacturer, don't lobby here in Iowa, but they lobby with their National Windows and Door Manufacturers Association of Iowa. There is, in fact, associations for everything. Mm-hmm. And so she reached out and had the national arm of windows and door manufacturers registered a lobby in Iowa in favor of this bill, just because we reached out cold. And all of those 3 no votes flipped to yes by the time we voted. Wow. And so it was such a cool experience to say, take a chance, right? What's it going to hurt to ask somebody if they're willing to weigh in on a bill? The worst you're going to get is no, or you uncover a rock that's a strong opposition and now you've got a real issue on your hands. But all that to say, the coalition building, you're absolutely right, was the thing that allowed this bill to pass. If we did not have the coalition of folks that we built, we would not have been able to get it done.
Well, so often lobbying is kind of a dirty word, and there's reasons for that in a lot of places. I know a lot of lobbyists in a lot of situations in a lot of capitals where it should be a dirty word, but oftentimes, you people who are advocating in a very well-intentioned way for really good priorities that are going to make people's lives better. So for you guys, for AARP, what were you hearing from seniors or their family members on this issue?
Yeah, so my background, like I said, is in healthcare policy. Prior to coming to AARP, I was a nursing home administrator. So I ran an 80-bed skilled nursing and a 55-bed assisted living. Worked for a while within private practice, and so interacted with seniors in a lot of different facets. And that really informed some of my perspective on how and why seniors are interested in accessory dwelling units. One of the things I was really keenly aware of when I was a nursing home administrator is that the bulk of my residents didn't want to be there. And that all comes down to where they can live, right? So if you don't have somewhere where you can remain and you can age in place, your only other solution is institutionalization. And so for AARP, accessory dwelling units are a housing solution for individuals who maybe have really low care needs and don't need to be in an institution. B, maybe can't necessarily afford institutional care, but could live on the same property as a family member in order to continue being cared for. But C, it's a really great intermediary option for folks too. So maybe you're not quite ready for an assisted living or a skilled nursing, but you want to be able to remain as independent as possible for as long as possible. All that to say, accessory dwelling units can really fit into that continuum of care. And that's something we hear from older adults all the time. I'm not ready to move to a retirement community or an assisted living, and I don't really need that level of care, but I also don't necessarily want to be alone. What's my option, right?
Right.
Or adult children who say, I would love to be able to have mom here, but not in the bedroom down the hall. So I think that that's really what we've heard from older adults across the country. And that's on the individual side. Now, from a state perspective, accessory dwelling units offer a really unique opportunity to save states dollars by allowing individuals to remain in their home longer. We know that it costs states more money to pay for institutional care. So let's find ways to make it easier for individuals to save their own money, spend their own money, make a private investment, and live in an accessory dwelling unit on their own land. So it's really twofold in kind of the different perspectives that we heard. But at the end of the day, I think the coolest thing about accessory dwelling units is that this doesn't cost states any dollars. It doesn't cost counties any dollars. It doesn't cost cities any dollars. It is an individual's personal investment in their housing choice on their property. And it's really hard to come by a housing solution that doesn't require state allocation of funds, nor a solution on the aging spectrum either.
Well, I can tell this hits close to home for me because, those of us who have baby boomer parents who are getting older, there's a lot of them. This is something we wrestle with right now, and I'm thinking about, like, is there a spot in my home that we could redo? What do we want to do? Do you want to send like a senior living facility, which feels like a big step that doesn't always feel great? And my parents and I were talking about this weekend, in fact, at dinner. So this is so pertinent. But so what did the bill that you guys actually worked on? What did the bill actually do? And was there any pushback to it?
There was a little bit of pushback, but I think it's important to note that there wasn't anybody who registered in opposition to the legislation. Everybody remained undecided, quote unquote. But our primary opposition came from cities and counties, although we worked really well with them to come to a really palatable solution. And that was really important for AARP. We do a lot of work with cities and counties, trying to make them more age-friendly. We know that some of the policies that are in place in communities aren't really age-friendly, whether that be transportation solutions, housing solutions. So we have a really good working relationship with communities. So I wouldn't even necessarily call that opposition per se. They just had a lot of concerns that we wanted to really try and address with them. But the long and the short of what this bill does. So this bill is a preemptive bill that prohibits cities and counties from passing regulations that are limiting towards accessory dwelling units. So it sets forward a bare minimum standard of what all cities and counties must allow when it comes to accessory dwelling units. So it goes through a list of the city/county shall item, and then a city/county shall not list of items. And we really toyed with different ways to write this, but it was the cleanest way and the clearest way to write a list of preemptions. And that was a really hard framework for people to swallow, right? At the end of the day, most cities and counties are not a fan of preemptive legislation. And so that was a real, I think, hurdle, and helping our legislators understand what that meant and what it didn't mean was also a real challenge. But at the end of the day, it requires all cities and counties to allow at least one accessory dwelling unit on any lot of land where a single family home is permitted. It then goes through and outlines those specifications at a bare minimum that cities and counties have to permit. So it talks about size, occupancy, parking, aesthetics, and what the actual structure looks like, utilities, street and sidewalk repair, HOAs, building codes, historic preservation, you name it, it addresses at a bare minimum what cities and counties have to allow.
So basically, you're restricting municipalities from being too restrictive. That's basically what happened.
Correct. Yes. And it's hard because you do have to think about it kind of in a double negative, right? And so that definitely was kind of a tongue twister when you're explaining things to legislators. We're telling you that they can't do this.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of municipalities have shown a willingness to be very restrictive and to basically take away people's freedoms. So I kind of appreciate that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that truly AARP's partnership with AFP lended a really strong hand in that. Because we do have such strong working relationships with cities and counties, it was really helpful for us to work with AFP here in Iowa to say, hey, how can we communicate to legislators really that strong, this is an overreach of cities or counties. How can we use AFP to really engage in that conversation with legislators? Because that's not necessarily a talking point that's appropriate coming from AARP, right? We are coming at this from an aging perspective, but what's the appropriate angle from AFP? And that was something that really resonated well with our legislators here. At the end of the day, a lot of aging policy isn't necessarily a sexy policy. People aren't super jazzed about aging policy most of the time, but property rights can get people excited. So it was all about finding the right angle and the right talking points with different legislators. And Tyler here in Iowa with you all did such a great job of helping bridge that gap where there might be one. But we really did a great job tag teaming those conversations.
That's great. It's good to hear that Tyler Rager, our state director in Iowa, is doing something right. So it's nice change of pace. I'm just kidding.
He's all that much, though. It'll go to his head. Yeah.
It would definitely. No, he's a stud, and that's great to hear, though. So I mean, what's the result of this? Have you heard from any seniors or families that they're planning to build an ADU because of this bill?
I hope so. Right. I jokingly told legislators all throughout session that I've promised my parents one, so I had a personal investment in this piece of legislation. Which my parents are far from meeting an accessory dwelling unit, but someday maybe I'll allow them in my backyard. But I think that really there is still kind of an implementation phase happening right now.
Sure.
This law just went into effect on July 1st. And the way the law is written, cities and counties can either pass their own ordinance that meets the requirements of the law, or they can be deferential to the state code and remain silent on it in their ordinances. And so I think a lot of cities and counties are still deciding how they want to manage that and what that's going to look like. So we have actually been working on a model ordinance that cities and counties could adopt if they wanted to comply. Well, they have to comply with the law, but if they wanted to pass their own version of an ordinance, we've been working with them to figure out how that's best written into local level code. So I think that there is still going to be a transition period. And we really get into a chicken or the egg situation in the sense that a lot of people haven't been asking about accessory dwelling units because they don't know what they are. They didn't know they were an option. And so I think there's an educational component too that we really want to help people understand what these are, what they can be, what they can't be. And help people really see that this is a housing solution, with the caveat that these are still an investment, right? These don't just pop up out of nowhere. You have to invest with your own personal funds to make this a reality. So we are not blind to the fact that this is not a solution for everyone, but for the people who can make it work, we're really glad that they can now.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned at the outset that I was surprised how important an issue housing is to so many people. Again, I think it was probably me being an idiot for not seeing that, but it became clear to me. I was in Texas talking to our team down there, and they were going to be working on housing issues, and a different sort than the ADUs. But the interest came at the other end of the age spectrum. It was one of our younger staff members in his 20s, been in the workforce for a few years, but interested in buying a house, lives in Dallas and then was in Austin, obviously two kind of really hot markets. And he wanted to work on the issue. He wanted to be the one who helped drive the issue in the legislative session. And I was like, why does this young guy want to do it? And it was basically like, oh yeah, his friends and himself don't have access to affordable housing. Like they can't buy a home. They can't get into a place that they can call their own and that they want. And there's regulations that are increasing the price all the time and making it less accessible for all kinds of people of any age. And it really kind of helped me focus like, oh, all right, this is an issue that cuts across society, and people at every age and every income level are really kind of dealing with it. So I appreciate seeing the success that you all have on these ADUs and kind of addressing what really is, a growing issue with, the baby boomers getting older and older. So,
yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, just like aging is a universal unifier, right? We are all getting older. We also all seek those basic necessities, housing being one of them. And so I think every single legislator we talked with this year indicated that there's been at least a handful of constituents in their district that's raised housing as an issue. Not every county is the same in what their challenges are, but every county has a challenge, I think, is what we were hearing from folks. Mm-hmm. And I think to your point, David, accessory dwelling units, while we certainly come at it from an aging in place perspective, this is also a really unique opportunity for young professionals in towns where maybe I can't afford a full house yet, but I don't really want to be in an apartment. I want it to still feel kind of residential. Accessory dwelling units can offer that solution for folks on a younger age spectrum too. And I always say I used to live in Milwaukee in an apartment, and there were some beautiful homes that had the structure that would be great for an accessory dwelling unit. And what I wouldn't have given to live in one of those kind of accessory structures in a neighborhood as opposed to maybe in an apartment, it just feels different. I purchased a townhome, I think almost a year and a half ago. And my main driver was just because I wanted it to feel different. I got tired of getting in an elevator to go up to my unit, or have to lug your groceries up out of the garage or the parking lot, whatever it may be. I wanted to pull into a garage and just unload my stuff there. And whether that's right or wrong, we all pursue things for how it makes us feel in some way, shape, or form. In addition to the necessity of having that housing that's safe and affordable too, right? I think that's the other challenge to your point, is that it's not getting any cheaper to live here in the U.S. Anywhere, regardless of where you're at. I feel fortunate in Iowa. We do have a relatively low cost of living compared to some states, but that's not necessarily true for everyone here.
Very true. Well, Paige, I really appreciate you joining us, and congratulations on a big win here for a win for freedom, we'd say, but also for the aging. And I
both of those things.
It's exactly right. It's exactly right. I really love the coalition's work you guys did. I think that's really a cool model, and really speaks to kind of the collaboration and the humility that different groups and the leaders of those groups could bring to find common ground and say and understand, like, hey, we're not motivated by the same thing here, but we can all get what we want by achieving this great reform.
Yep, it was a really great experience, and it will be probably one of my most memorable pieces of legislation. It was really the first bill that I worked on from start to finish, and it felt pretty cool to be able to say that from a year and a half later, we got this done, which doesn't always happen. A lot of legislation takes a heck of a lot longer than a year and a half. So we felt pretty good about that. And we're going to try and get the band back together, find something else for us to keep working on. So hopefully I'll come back to you with some more things to talk about.
Darn right. You keep putting up the wins. We'll keep talking. It'll be my pleasure.
All right.
Well, thanks,
That's
Paige.
great.
So,
thanks,
folks,
Steven.
Housing is a big issue because it impacts everyone in one way or another. So some families just want to create a space for their aging parents to live close, while others are trying to find something affordable, giving people more options and a smart step towards solving some of these challenges. It's not the full answer, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. Hey, if you like this episode and would like to stay connected with the podcast, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And always remember, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there and defend freedom and liberty. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.